All right. Okay, so I'm looking on the same place, the same practice test. We have the mark scheme for paper 1. Okay, I got it pulled up here. What I want to show you is how this gets graded. Okay, normally I would have you guys share it with each other, but that's not going to work, obviously. So you're just going to have to grade it as objectively as you can on yourself. Okay, but I think it's valuable for you to see how it works. Okay. All right, so for 13A, it says why, according to source M, was there resentment towards the civil rights workers? Okay, for 13A, and I want you to actually grade this. So you're going to put the grades in the margin there, right? If you have a different colored pen or pencil, do that, use that. Okay, so 13A is a 3-point question. Okay, a 3-point question. And what you do is you get 1 point for each, response, each relevant point up to 3. Okay, so it's asking what the resentment was. These are the most common answers that they have, but they're not the only answers. Okay, so they aim to break up existing customs and social practices that have been in place for a long time. They were seen to be hippies, and most people did not think they were a good role model. They were arrogant because they wanted to reform the whole state and impose their beliefs on everyone. All right, I want you to read your first question, 13A, read your answer and see where you have these points, okay? For each one of them, give yourself 1 point. It's possible that you have other points that are legitimate, that's possible, right? If you think you have something that's legitimate, then just share it with the group and we'll all see if we agree with you that it's legitimate or not. All right, give me a thumbs up if you're ready. Okay, put the score in the margin there, like a 2/3, 2 out of 3, or 1 out of 3, or a 3 out of 3. All right, show me with your fingers here. Show me your fingers what you think your answer got, a 1, a 2, or a 3. Oh, Ilha and Yash think a lot about themselves. All right, Ilha, you think you're so smart. Why don't you read your answer to us and we'll see if Raul and Yash and I agree. As Ilha's reading, Yash, Raul, and I will hold our hand up and then we'll count 1, 2, 3 as we hear the points. Okay, go Ilha, go.
And so, according to source M, there was resentment against the civil rights workers because it says that they made a great show of breaking up customs and challenging the social practices that were already there. Then also the people viewed the social, or like the civil rights workers, as kinds of hippies and not very good role models. And they also held resentment because of the civil rights workers' arrogance when wanting to reform the whole state in the way they thought it should be.
Okay, Ilha, I need to be honest. Did you look at the mark scheme when you did your test?
No, I just like looked at the 3 points that were in the source because it just lists those 3 out.
Okay, all right, so that's fine. So Ilha, you got your 3 points, right? I think this one's a pretty easy one to get your full points on, right? So that's good. Do you guys understand how this one's graded? Okay, the format is exactly the same every year. So this is literally this is the test that they used 3 years ago, right? So the formatting is exactly the same. The first question is always 5 points. It's always a 3 and a 2. Okay, so for 2 points, this is 13B. Okay, this is the message conveyed by source O. This is the political cartoon with the big giant cop who's like stepping on the black guy and stuff, right? Beating the other dude with a club, right? This is a maximum of 2 points. You get 1 point for every relevant point. Okay, and these are the like most common answers, but again, it's not the only answers. So if you have something you feel is legitimate that's not on here, then just speak up and we'll see if we agree.
So when we're taking these tests, we want to like write as much as we can, right? Because we only get points and you don't lose them, right? So if you have, is that how it works, right?
You'll see that is true up until the last question. There's
Okay.
there's a way that you can lose points in the last question.
Okay, so in this case for 13 A and B, if you were just like describing the stuff, then they would only look if you had at least 2 of those points down. Okay.
Yeah, and once you get the 2, then you stop, right? Ideally, you would give me like 3 good ones, because if one of your other ones is not so good, then you have a spare, right? That's usually what's going on here. But you'll see that that's not always true in the last one. And you'll see how the last one's slightly different. Okay, give me your score, 1, 2, or 0. Okay, all right, Raul, can you share your answer for B? And then Yash and
Yeah.
Ilha will grade you as we go.
The cartoon conveys the excuse and result of / for the white police force in America with regards to their reactions to the civil rights movements. The white sheriff is the biggest figure, so as to show their overwhelming power, standing on a dejected, normal-sized black man, also to show the power. The picture also shows the possible shrink or minute nature or character or spunk or will in the white allies, like the I worded that terribly, but what I was trying to say was how the people who resent the civil rights workers feel about the white allies.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What do we think about that second point? I'm not sure I would give the second point, because the way you read it wasn't very clear to me. What do you guys think, Yash and Ilhan? You thinking 1 or 2? Give me a 1 or a 2.
I think it's like, it's almost there. It's just a wording difference, I think, would have made it clear, but
Yeah, I kind of think that would have been a 1, Raul. The way you read it to me, it didn't sound clear to me. Maybe if I was looking at it, it would be more clear, but hearing it from you didn't sound right. So I would be inclined to give it a 1. All right, these ones are pretty straightforward, right? So let's move into these next ones here. Okay, so let's move to question number 14. Question 14, with reference to its origin, purpose, and content, analyze the value and limitations of source N for historians studying the civil rights movement, right? So they're looking for values and limitations, and the way that you assess what a value and limitation is you use purpose or origin, purpose, and content in the value and limitations, right? Either it's a value because of its origin and purpose, but a limitation because of its content, or some other combination like that. Does that make sense to you guys? Right? So your points are that you have to have the value, you have to have the limitation, and then the origin, purpose, and contents will be mixed in here, right? Here's the way that the scoring works on this one. You cannot get a 3 or a 1, right? You can only get a 0, a 2, or a 4. So if it's a 2, only the value or limitation is discussed, you give them a 2. If they did the origin, purpose, and content should be used in supporting evidence to make the relevant comments on the values and limitations. For a 4, there must be at least one reference for each of them in either value or limitations. Okay, so they have to have both limitations and values in order to get the 4. So you can only get a 0, 2, or 4. Is that clear, you guys? Okay. Here's the value and here's the limitations. Take a moment and read them. So there's one thing that should probably stand out to you guys. right? Do you guys see bias anywhere in here?
Yeah, it's like in the limitations, it says this knowledge may have influenced the author's view of the events.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the closest you're going to get to bias, right? Closest you're going to get to bias. But when you guys were all writing your IAs, every single student that gave me bias, I crossed it out and said it was bad, right? That's because bias is almost always the wrong answer. Okay, I don't want you to think about bias. Bias is almost always the wrong answer, especially when you're dealing with a secondary source written by a historian, right? So you got to think more about like the time when it's written, the purpose of the thing that it's written. All right, so look in your answers and see what you think about your answer. Do you get a 0, a 2, or a 4? What do you guys got? Give me your 0, 2, or 4. Josh says 2. Ilha says 2. Raul?
I'm thinking 2 as well.
Okay. All right. So Yash, let's have you read yours, and Raul and Ilha will grade Yash as he goes.
Okay, so the year that the book was written in has both value and limitation. It is valuable because after many years, the truth of an event can be condensed down as more and more resources are available to be drawn from, which means that the content is refined. However, this also means that the truth behind the movement could have been, well, I guess, yeah, like the author could have selected the sources due to the sharp condensed, like the condensing nature of the textbook. So since the choice of the material is the choice of the material, like the purpose of the textbook is to gather all of the relevant information from that time period into a condensed format. The choice of what is appropriate may be tilted towards whatever the author feels is important.
Okay. Okay. So I got a problem. All three of you look like you're not reading. Like all three of you seem like you're thinking about the answer as you read it. Like Yash wasn't even looking at the screen and he was like looking to the side and like composing his answer. Like, did you read it? Did you write your answers?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I guess yeah.
But you're not reading
I
what you
think
wrote. You guys, all three of you, I think, are adding things to what you wrote, right?
I
Ilha,
think
Raul, Yash, all three of you did. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut.
yeah, I think we're like as we're reading, we're like, oh yeah, no, that's terrible how I wrote it, and then we're like, but I really tried to mean this when I was writing this, but the way I wrote it or whatever.
Okay. I want you guys to have some integrity here and read what you actually wrote. Even if it's wrong, even if it's jacked up, even if you made a mistake, read what you actually wrote because it matters, right? I can't help you if you guys are editorializing as you go once you've seen the answers. That's not helpful. Does that see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Yeah? Okay. All right. So Yash, the way that you read it to us, even though I know you were editorializing some of it and changing some of it, the way that you presented it to us seemed like a 4 to me. That seemed pretty clearly like a 4, right? What do you think, Ilha Raul? Did you think about Yash's answer?
Yeah.
So I felt that like when you scroll down on this, it talks about how you need to have like specific reference to all three of the purpose and the origin and the context. I feel like I didn't do that completely. So I mean, ideally, I would give myself a 3, but the way that you stated how the grading works, I thought it would mostly be closer to a 2 because I'm not necessarily directly relating to like the origins in specifics in my.
So I think you were, right? I think you were talking a lot about the date of the publication, which is the origin, right? You talked about what the publication is and why they would have chosen certain things to put into a textbook extract, right? That's the purpose. right? You talked about making the choices of what to put in and what to leave out. That's the content, right? I think that you have all of them there. I think maybe it's not as full and robust as you would have liked it to be, but we can call it a dirty 4 if you want, but it's still a 4. A dirty 4 is still a 4. Does that make sense, right? It doesn't have to be beautiful. It just has to collect your points and move on. Cool. All right. So those are the easiest ones to grade. Those first ones, and then we're going to get to the ones that are a little bit more involved. Okay. So here's number 15. Compare and contrast what sources N and P reveal about the consequences of the Freedom Summer. Now, this is where you guys will see these mark schemes. This is what how IB grades everything, basically, right? If you are going to get a 5 or a 6, then your response includes clear and valid points of comparison and contrast. Now, what a lot of your classmates did in person, both yesterday and today, is a lot of them would contrast the two articles, because one of them basically says Freedom Summer was successful and the other one says Freedom Summer was not very successful, right? The contrast, almost all of your classmates wrote really, really good, nice contrasts, right? But a lot of your classmates did not include a compare very much, right? Or a very, very sparse one, okay? If that's the case, if you are like them, then you would get a 3 or a 4, right? Some valid points of comparison and or contrast, but the points may lack clarity, right? 1 to 2 is where we're getting into a real danger zone. This is where you're not actually comparing and contrasting things. You're mostly just summarizing what they said, right? That's the danger zone. And I don't think you guys are going to be in that zone. I think a lot of you guys will be, straddling this grouping right here. All right. So look through yours right now and you figure out what band you're going to go into, the 5-6 band, the 3-4, or the 1-2, or the 0.
So I had a problem with trying to format this response. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to just write a comparison paragraph and then a contrast paragraph after that. It didn't seem like it was flowing as logically as it should have. So what would you recommend?
So did you write it as 2 paragraphs?
Basically, yeah.
So that's fine. The formatting doesn't matter. And if that's what you need to do to get your points, then who cares? You just get your points, right? Again, a dirty 6 is still a 6, right? That formatting doesn't matter as long as it's clear that both paragraphs are part of answer 15, right? Then it doesn't matter. It could be, ideally you would have one, well integrated, beautiful paragraph, that like the heavens open up and the angels bring to me on a tablet, right? But like really, a dirty 6 is still a 6. All right, what do we think? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yasha's giving himself. Yasha, you giving I can't see your hand. 4. We got a 4, 4s. You guys are all kind of 4s, 3s. Okay. All right. So here's a question for you. How do I know if it's a 5 or a 6? Like, let's say I have both compare and contrast, right? They're both in there. Is it a 5 or a 6? How do you know what's the difference between a 5 and a 6?
Just like how relatively clear it is, because that's like part of the description, I guess.
Yeah, I wish I had a copy. You guys know Pooja, right? Pooja, we read Pooja's in class today, and the person who read hers was kind of waffling between 5 and 6, right? Pooja had this really, really good description of the contrast, but she only had like one really quick line of the compare and didn't really go into a lot of detail there. That's what we all agreed was a 5, right? Where 1 is really nice and good and clear and valid. The other one was not super clear, like it didn't go into a lot of detail, right? But they're both there. That's the difference between a 5 and a 6. Okay, so let's, Raul, can you read yours? You said that you were waffling between a 3 and a 4. So let's read yours and then have the 3 of us grade yours as we go.
Source N took a more glorifying approach to explaining the Freedom Summer, while Source P took less time in how the Freedom Riders carried out their mission and more on the bloodied results. Source N fails to discuss any direct, real casualties, though there were many, and speaks on hardships in merely one sentence. Source P took the majority of its 2 paragraphs to discuss casualties in detail with numbers attached. It delineates the consequences of the Freedom Summer as the source also uses its last 4 sentences of the second paragraph. Sorry, I lost my place. Last 4 sentences of the second paragraph to discuss the ultimate failure of the Freedom Summer's original, though it did garner national attention.
Okay.
After original, I meant to say after Summer's original mission, anyways.
Okay. I think that's a pretty clear 4. But I don't think I heard a compare in there, really. Right? That it feels to me like, Raul, you basically said only contrast. Does that seem right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, but your contrast was good. Like you had multiple sentences, you had multiple points of description, right? I thought it was clear. I thought it was on point, right? So that seems to me like a pretty solid 4. I think that's pretty clearly a 4, but it's also clearly not a 5 and 6. Cool. Ilha, Yash, where would you guys put that grade?
I think I would agree with the 4 because yeah, it's right, but yeah.
All right. Ilha, Yash, did you guys have the same problem? Did you guys do basically just a contrast without the
Well,
compare, or?
Yeah, I have a lot more contrast, but I think my compare is like really bad. So there, it's like just like it's describing it basically for the compare section. It's
Okay.
just describing stuff. So I didn't feel like I reached the level of 5 or 6. So
Okay. How about you, Ilha?
That's about what I did. Like I had a short kind of like a brief sentence on like some of the similarities between the 2, but I like kind of focused on the other ones.
Yeah.
Contrast.
So for this kind of thing, like usually the documents will be very, usually the contrast is very easy, right? Because the documents, because you're like trained to look at how they're different, right? Like it's easier to see how they're different. It's something you need to be in mind of that they're going to have to compare and. All right, let's move to number 16. Okay, so 16, I'm gonna have to zoom out a little bit. All right, so 16 is using the sources and your own knowledge, evaluate and success the Freedom Summer in furthering the cause of Black civil rights in the United States. This is the one where Yash was asking, will you always get points if you write more? This is where you can get hurt on that, okay? Because they're asking you to use the sources and your own knowledge. So there's 3 different criteria that you get graded on with this, okay? Your own knowledge, the sources, and then your focus, okay? Sometimes you'll see a student, when we're grading these things, right? Sometimes you'll see a student, when I took the IB training, they gave us a bunch of these essays to grade, right? And I had a student who didn't know the civil rights. She didn't know what Freedom Summer was, right? And so, but she did know a lot about the civil rights movement. And so she wrote about like Brown versus Board and the Little Rock Nine and desegregating schools and the Montgomery bus boycott and Martin Luther King, right? And she's writing about all this stuff, but it's not Freedom Summer, right? She just couldn't remember what Freedom Summer was. And so she decided to, what we call a filibuster. She decided to filibuster us and just kind of turn on the fire hose of everything she can remember from, basically, right? The problem is she cannot get this top response here, right? Her response is not focused on the question. It's not even generally focused on the question. It lacks focus, right? So if you do that, like this girl, she wrote like a 4-page essay and like 1 page of her essay was relevant and 3 pages were not, right? She got a 3 because it was so disorganized, right? So this is why Yash, I was alluding to you that they want you to focus on what the question is. They do not want you to just waste our time reading every single thing you can possibly think of. Okay, so let's brainstorm for a moment on our own knowledge. What aspects of your own knowledge can you bring in about Freedom Summer that are relevant?
Well, I guess it's not
Say it again.
directly. It's not. I guess not directly related to Freedom Summer, which is probably not a good thing. But I talked more about the broader context of like the successes in the North with the Washington marches and the "I Have a Dream" speech, and how the South wasn't necessarily impacted by that, and so the movement moved towards the South with the Freedom Summer. So that's too broad. I think it's not related to the question.
I think that's too broad. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds too broad. What else could we put that is more specific related? Ilha, what do you think? What can you add?
So what I put wasn't very like connected really, but I kind of tried. So I said I didn't like really know much about the details of Freedom Summer, but I like said it like overall like had a success because it like attracted attention to like the stuff like the blacks in the South and how that could have led to like acts later on, like the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. And
Okay, I think the Voting Rights Act, I think that Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act are directly connected to Freedom Summer, right? Because the brutality of the Freedom Summer was one of the direct things moving into the Civil Rights Act. So I think that that is pretty directly connected, and I think that's a good way to expand it, right? I think, Yash, your instinct of putting it in the context of the greater civil rights movement is a good instinct, but we need to narrow down your time frame a little bit, right? The March on Washington was years before, so that's too much. What was happening at the same time as Freedom Summer? You have like the St. Augustine, the beaches, like the wade-ins on the St. Augustine beaches. We have the Freedom Rides are happening at the same time. The KKK is bombing the Freedom Rides, right? We have John Lewis getting beaten up by cops on the March to Selma, right? Those are all overlapping at the exact same time. And so those ones I think would be valid, right? Because you could say that those things are happening. I think the best thing to do is to add in some individuals from the Freedom Summer, right? Can you guys remember any of the names of the leaders of Freedom Summer? So Bob Moses was the leader. Bob Moses, he's the guy that dedicated his life to teaching calculus and stuff to students afterwards, right? And opening up black schools. Amzie Moore, who was the veteran, he was one of the veterans groups, leading one of the veterans groups. And he's also the guy who found Emmett Till's body in the river, right? And Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer was the woman who went to Congress and went to Congress, and she talked about her Mississippi appendectomy where they forcefully sterilized her, right? I think the best thing to do is add those people in, and because none of them are in the documents, right? Okay, so in order for you to get a 7-9, your response has to be focused. You have to have clear references to the sources, and you effectively use the evidence from the sources. And then you also have to add accurate, relevant knowledge of yourself from your own background, from your own knowledge. Okay. If you don't meet those standards, then you just move down the table until you find the part of the table that you do meet. Okay. So go ahead and grade yours right now and come up with a score.
So for sophomore class secretary, we have Jessica Young. For sophomore class vice president, we have Sophia Liu. For sophomore president, we have Nasha Conrad. For junior class secretary, we have Carolyn Jenner. For junior vice president, we have Abigail Swatler Cashman. For junior class president, we have Courtney Kelly. For senior class secretary, we have Shivani Rivas. For senior class vice president, we have Luke Baker. For senior class president, we have Fonseca. Thank you.
Okay, what score did you give yourself? 5, 5, 5. That's not very good. I think maybe you guys are being too tough on yourselves. That's possible. All right, Ilha, let's have you read your answer, and then Raul, Yash, and I will all grade you and see where you fall.
Okay, so I wrote, although Freedom Summer was not a direct success in the goals of the civil rights volunteers, it eventually led to successful, like, like awareness brought to the African Americans down in Mississippi, which eventually led to positive like action for them in the form of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act that followed soon after. For example, in source N, it states that although it was the MF, although it says that the MFDP was not recognized officially, there were still 80,000 Blacks who were joined. And although that wasn't nearly as much as they had hoped to join, it was still many people that also brought awareness to the situation. And that's basically it.
Okay.
So I didn't really have much, so that's why I put myself at 10.
Okay. All right. So Raul, where would you put Ilha on these? How would you rank Ilha for focus?
Focus, I would say maybe 5 or 6.
You would put him here generally focused?
Yeah.
Okay. And Yash, how about you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Generally focused. Yeah.
So I think Ilha was pretty focused on the question. Well, let me double check the question. Evaluate the success. I think he was pretty focused. I actually would put him in this top category for being focused. Like, I don't think Ilha talked about anything other than that, right? I don't think he talked about anything other than that. So I'm comfortable putting him in this top category, right? Okay. Yash, where are you putting him in this middle use of sources?
So I think he did refer to the sources and like he pulled context from them. So I think he used the sources properly. So in the 7 to 9 section, probably.
Okay. Raul, what do you think?
I think I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree too. I think there was some clarity issues. Ilha was kind of stumbling over some parts that weren't super clear to me, right? But he was quoting from the sources. It was clear to me that he had read the sources and understood the sources, right? So I would be inclined to put it here, but I could also be talked into putting it down here just because of the clarity wasn't super great. Okay. All right. Raul, where would you put him in this last category?
The 4 to I couldn't hear some of it. I'm thinking 4 to 6.
Okay. And why are you thinking that?
Because I can't exactly remember what I remember he talked about the voting rights and another thing. I think that it was relevant, but the tie between that was a little bit hard for me to see.
All right, Yash, where do you think Ilha should go on this one?
Yeah, I would go with the 4 to 6 as well because there wasn't really too much specific reference to stuff that was outside of the given texts. So.
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable putting him in this category on this level for this one, right? So Ilha, you did mention the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, and those are not in the readings, right? You did make mention there, but I think pretty clearly you did not. You made little or no attempt to synthesize your knowledge, right? You basically just mentioned it and then left it there, right? And so I think that. So I would be inclined to give you probably a 7, right? You have a top here, and it's not totally clear which one you're on in here. and it's clearly down on this one, right? So that would be like you clearly meet all three of these and you clearly meet one of these. And so that means I would say that's a 7. That's where I would put that. Okay. Because I think we can all agree that Ilha does not deserve to be down here on any of these, right? Right? He is clearly focused. He did clearly use the sources and he did bring some outside knowledge, right? So he's definitely not in this band, right? So he's kind of straddling these two bands. And so you just look at check, 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 X, X, right? Is where you kind of end up. And so that would mean he's a 7. Right? Do you guys feel confident about how this is graded?
Yeah, I had a question also about like how you would suggest to split our time in this paper.
Right. So the last questions are always the biggest questions, right? So this was a 9. So add up your score real quick. So your score should be something X out of 24. Your score should be an X out of 24. So the way I would split up my time, if I have an hour to do this, right? I would spend probably 2 or 3 minutes brainstorming the questions before I even look at the sources. And then I would spend a good 10 minutes on just the sources before I even try answering the questions, right? So that leaves you with about, say, 45 minutes, let's say, right? 45 minutes to write. Of the 45 minutes, I think you should probably have, 10 minutes for the first question, 10 minutes for the second question. That puts you at 20 minutes, right? So that puts you have 25 left. And then you have like 15 or 12 and 12. That seems like a pretty good way to do it, right? A pretty good way to do it. That seems about right to me. The tricky one is time management on this one, right? And the thing that a lot of students don't do, which I think is very problematic, is that a lot of students don't properly spend the time reading the documents, right? They just don't do it. And that's a real problem. It's a real problem because then you start answering the questions and you realize that there's like sections of the document that you didn't really, right? That I think is the number one reason why students do bad on this question. So I would definitely spend about 10 minutes before you even write anything at all, reading it, absorbing it, understanding it, making sure you know what you're talking about, right? Brainstorming things that you can put into the essay and then start writing it. Right? Students who start writing immediately almost inevitably will do bad on the test. Okay, so what score did you guys give yourselves on this? Raul, what'd you get out of a 24?
I give myself a 13 out of 24.
Okay, Yash?
On 18.
18? Okay, Ilha?
I think mine was 18 too.
Okay. All right, so you need a minimum of a 9 out of 24 in order for you to get any points at all. In order for you to get any points. So you guys all met the minimum to get points, which means that you can move on and you can get the points for class. Right? So that's good. That's good. Right? If you think, remind yourself, like at a 9 is your skin of the teeth passing, right? Okay. There's one last thing that I want you guys to do. And my bell just rang again. All right, so where is it? Here, I'll just share my screen. I gotta find where I put it here. All right. So what I want you to do is I want you to take this question right here, and I want you to kind of outline how you would answer it for all 4 countries. Okay, for United States, South Africa, India, and Ireland. United States, South Africa, India, Ireland. Outline all 4. The students in class are doing it as like a 1-pager. They're doing like a poster and stuff, right? That's really hard for us to do online. So let's have you do it as just an outline. Don't write out the whole essay, that's right? But we just want to have evidence that you know that you could answer the question for all 4. And this is a question from the test 4 years ago. I cut and pasted from the test. Okay. So do that, get ready for next time. We'll discuss it. We'll move on to another question. We'll walk through another question. Cool? All right, I'm gonna put this in the chat real quick. Let me stop sharing it. I'll put the question in the chat real quick so you can copy it into your thing. That way you can grab it and copy and paste it onto a document real quick. Cool, if you didn't catch it on a screenshot or something. All right, as soon as you guys are good to go, then you're good to go.